My wannabe stepmom is a gold digger, so I prove it and stop the marriage. My dad, who is a wealthy businessman, recently got engaged to a woman who was only a few years older than me, and things started to get fishy really quickly. I always had my doubts about her, but I couldn't put my finger on what was wrong until I did some digging and uncovered some shocking information. So here's how I stopped my dad from marrying a gold digger. Let me give you a bit more context about my dad's relationship with Jane before I dive into how I uncovered her true intentions. My dad had been single for a while after my mom passed away, and we all wanted him to find someone who would make him happy. When he met Jane, he was smitten. She was young and beautiful, with a great sense of humor and a magnetic personality. We were all thrilled to welcome her into our family, and I was happy to see my dad so happy again. However, as time went on, I started to notice some things that made me feel uneasy. Jane was always pushing my dad to spend more money on her, and to me she seemed to be more interested in his wealth than anything else. She would drop hints about expensive gifts she wanted, like this stupid Prada tote that was like $4,000. And I even overheard her talking on the phone to one of her friends about how she couldn't wait to be married into money. She also didn't spend a lot of time with my younger sisters, who could have really used a mother figure. She would tell my father things like it was taking her time to adapt to being a mother. Okay, maybe that was the case. I get it. So I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt at first. She always said she came from a modest background and a broken home, so maybe she was excited just to be well taken care of. We never met her parents. She said her mom had passed away and her dad was a drunk living across the country and that she hadn't spoken to him in about 10 years. But the more time I spent with her, the more my suspicions grew. I started to feel like she was using my dad for his money, and I couldn't let that happen. I decided to confide in some of my friends, and they suggested I hire a private investigator to look into Jane's background, just to be sure. Either way, it could put an end to these thoughts in my mind, and that was worth the price of the investigator all by itself. So I found a reputable private investigator and gave them all the information. They worked quickly and efficiently, and within a few weeks, they had uncovered some shocking information. Jane had a history of marrying wealthy men and taking their money before divorcing them and moving on to the next victim. She would change her name and move to a new city, where she would start the process all over again. It was like a never-ending cycle of using rich men for their money. One of the most recent cases involved a man named John, who was a successful businessman and had a net worth of around $10 million. Jane, who was actually named Kathy during this particular affair, met John through mutual friends and started dating shortly after. They seemed to be head over heels for each other, and they got engaged after only a few months of dating. The wedding was a lavish affair, with hundreds of guests, ice sculptures, and an open bar. But less than a year into the marriage, things started to go south. According to the private investigator's report, Jane had been cheating on John with another wealthy man. Imagine that. John found out about the affair and was devastated. He tried to work things out with Jane, but she was unapologetic and only interested in taking as much of his money as possible. In the divorce settlement, Jane was able to get away with a staggering $2 million, which she promptly used to buy a new house and start her life over in a new city. She changed her name, and within a few months, she was already scouting for her next wealthy victim. How do people even get away with that? It's ridiculous. I had no idea that it would be this bad, and I knew I had to do something to stop my dad from falling into her trap. I didn't want to confront my dad or Jane until I had all of the concrete evidence, so I waited until we had a small family dinner before laying out all the information I had gathered. Once everyone was gathering for the meal, I called a toast. With a manila folder in front of me on the table, I raised my glass and said to Dad and Kathy. Everyone looked confused, but Jane looked horrified. She looked down at the folder in front of me and then back up at me as she tried to shake it off. My sisters giggled, thinking I was just being silly. May Dad and Kathy be forever in love. Dad stopped me that time. Son, what on earth is wrong with you? He said, kind of laughing a little to ease the tension. Oh, that's right. Her name is Jane now. I totally forgot. And then boom, I opened the folder and began to make my statement. I am a little concerned about Jane's past behavior. What is her real name anyway? The tension continued to grow as I laid out all of the evidence against Jane. My dad's face was a mask of shock and disbelief, while Jane looked like she had been caught with her hand in the cookie jar. I could tell that she was scrambling to come up with an excuse, but I knew there was nothing she could say that would excuse her behavior. As I continued to speak, Jane started to interrupt me, trying to defend herself. She claimed that she had never been interested in my dad's money and that she genuinely cared about him. But her words rang hollow, and I could see the truth in her eyes. She was a gold digger through and through. My dad was furious with me for hiring a private investigator and not trusting him, but as I continued to speak, I could see the anger turn to gratitude. He realized that I had only been trying to protect him and our family's wealth, and eventually he thanked me for my efforts. Jane, on the other hand, was becoming more and more agitated. She started to make up crazy excuses, like how she had to divorce her previous husbands because they were abusive, or how she was actually the one who had a lot of money and didn't need my dad's wealth. But no one was buying it, and her lies only made her look more guilty. As the conversation continued, Jane became increasingly defensive, and her true colors started to show. She began to lash out, calling me and my dad all sorts of names and accusing us of trying to ruin her life. It was a surreal scene, and I couldn't believe that someone could be so callous and manipulative. I was actually taken back by how much there really was behind that facade she had put on. If she had kept her cool, she might have been making me look like the idiot, but instead my gamble paid off and we found the real devil behind the mask. In the end, Jane stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. For some reason, she didn't leave her engagement ring and was clinging very tightly to her Prada tote. We never heard from her again, and my dad eventually moved on and found someone who truly cared about him. It was a difficult situation, but I knew I had done the right thing by uncovering Jane's true intentions and stopping her from taking advantage of my dad. What would you have done differently if you were the son? Let us know in the comments below. When you subscribe, be sure to click the notification bell. Click here for more Tangled threads.